surveys. We've discussed certification that you would expect to find on a small ship or a vessel less than 200 gross tons. We now need to discuss the verification of the certification and then briefly discuss how we're going to prepare for such a survey. I'm going to look initially at MGN 280 and then the small workboat code, not small vessels workboat code, and they are very similar. There's no real difference. You could learn either or, and the same information is repeated in the two. So let's have a look at MGN 280 together. Remember the areas of operation. So category 0 is unrestricted, 150 miles up to 6, which is within 3 miles of a nominated departure point and never more than 3 miles from land in favorable weather and in daylight. So we go from 0 to 6. Certification. To be issued with a certificate for a particular area of operation, a vessel must comply with all of the requirements of this code for that operating area and to satisfaction of the certifying authority. The certificate is valid for how many years? 5 years. 5 years. Section 27. Procedures, certification, examination, and maintenance. There are a few definitions here. An authorized person means a person who, by reason of relevant professional qualifications, practical experience, or expertise, is authorized by the certifying authority. Compliance examination means an examination of the vessel, its machinery, fittings, and equipment by an authorized person to ascertain that the vessel's structural, machinery, equipment, and fittings comply with the requirements of this code. Part of this examination conducted when the vessel is out of the water. For vessels of similar type, the certifying authority may exercise discretion in carrying out the compliance examination entirely out of the water. So if we were going to have an out-of-water survey, we are going to make sure the vessel, machinery, fittings, and equipment are at the same level of this code or as this code. We have an annual examination, which means a general or partial examination of the vessel, its machinery, fittings, and equipment as far as can be readily seen. So an annual is a general examination, an overview that's been satisfactorily maintained as required by the code, and that the arrangements, fittings, and equipment provided on the document of compliance of examination and declaration form are all in good order and as per the code. We have SCV1, which means the form for an application for examination of the vessel. So that's what the owner, or you as the captain, would fill out to request a examination of the vessel. SCV2 means a report form for a compliance examination and declaration. That is the actual certificate that you're going to have. So that is a small vessel in commercial use 2, completion and examination declaration. Prior to entering into service, a vessel should be in receipt of a small commercial vessel certificate for that vessel. How would you go about doing that? You choose a certifying authority and contact them to obtain a copy of the application form, and that's called an SCV1. Complete this form, return it to the certifying authority, and then they will, together you'll arrange with the certifying authority for the vessel to be examined by an authorized person and documented on the report of a compliance examination and declaration, SCV2. Where a vessel is required to have approved stability information, we'll talk about that when we get to the stability part of this video, the owner, managing agent, must be in possession of an approved stability information booklet before the certificate is issued. A certificate should be valid for not more than 5 years from the date of examination of the vessel out of the water. A new vessel, when it has its first survey, it's the same. The certificate may be valid for a lesser period of time as determined by the certifying authority. Renewal and annual examinations. So we will have an annual examination which will either be done by an authorized person, or it can be done by a self-confirmation. Annual examination by an authorized person. The owner or manager should arrange for an annual examination of a vessel, and it should be carried out by an authorized person on behalf of the certifying authority within 3 months either side of the anniversary date of the certificate. So it will be an annual inspection. Depending then what the boat does, you will also have either possibly an intermediate or in-water inspection. If you're carrying cargo, you've got different categories and different uses of the vessel. So make sure if you're working on a small tug that you are aware that's an authorized person annually and for renewal. If you're working on a transfer vessel and you're carrying several crew and several people, it's going to be an authorized person. If you're a pilot boat, it's going to be self. With OW, down here it says OW is out of water examination and a 3-year intermediate examination. So it's going to be self, out of water, plus an intermediate inspection. That's between year 2 and year 3 of this 5-year validity. We'll look at this again now in the workboat code, but I wanted you to kind of have an idea of where you're going to get it. If you're working on a small vessel and you're compliant to the small vessel code, please have a look at section 27 and make sure you're happy with the survey data. There will be no difference between this and the workboat code. Okay, so let's look at the workboat code together. Remember in MGN 280, what number, what section was it that we were looking at for our examination? It was section 27. It's the same in this. That's how close these are. So if we go to section 27, it will be procedures, certification, examination, maintenance and reporting of accidents. Section 27. For the purpose of this section, SW B1 means the form of application for the examination, and SWB2, it's the same, isn't it? Small workboat B2 form 2 means the report form for compliance. That is what you are going to have on your boat. Requirements and procedures for workboats to be examined and certified. The owner, stroke manager, agent of a vessel to be operated under the code shall apply to a certifying authority with SWB1. They'll then fill out the form and they'll get an agreed date for someone to come and inspect the boat. Prior to entering into service, the owner manager should be in receipt of a certificate for the vessel. The certificate should be in force and displayed in a conspicuous place on board. Where it's not possible to display the certificate due to the nature of the vessel, a rib, then it should be available on board for inspection. A signed and authenticated copy of the form is to be retained on board. Where it's not reasonable, because it might blow over the side, then you must be the provider on request to the relevant authority. An authorized person, as directed by the certifying authority, should undertake a compliance examination of the vessel in compliance with this code. The certifying authority must be satisfied the vessel has been designed and built to the small workboat code. A certificate should be valid for not more than 5 years from the date of examination of the vessel out of the water by an authority. This should be very familiar to what I just said. It's a copy and paste. For a newly constructed vessel, it's when it enters into the service. The certificate may be valid for a lesser period of time, depending on what the certifying authority said. They also have, this is different, an annual identification disc to be prominently displayed and visible from the outside of the vessel. It's like an old, very old, car tax form. And this acts as a ready indication, so an easily accessible visual indication that the vessel is complying with the workboat code. Renewal examination. The owner or the managing agent should arrange for a renewal examination to be carried out by an authorized person from the chosen certifying authority prior to the expiration of the existing certificate. Again, we have intermediate examination and we have annual and we have renewal. And it will be very similar to the small vessel code in the fact that it depends on where you're going, what sort of thing you've got going on. We have a authorized person again, we have an intermediate inspection, we have a self-inspection, and we have an out of water inspection. So an annual inspection would be carried out by the owner and manager should arrange for an annual examination of a workboat to be carried out by an authorised person on behalf of the certifying authority within 3 months of either side. That's exactly the same. They come along, they endorse the back of the code, and it allows you another year of that disc. We also have a intermediate examination, that's between year 2 and 3, and it is equivalent to the annual examination. It must be carried out on behalf of the certifying authority out of the water. So the vessel must be lifted, and it allows the examiner or the surveyor to check the rudders, check the anodes, check the anchors, all of that stuff that you can't see when the boat is in the water. Happy? I want you to be aware, again, if you're working on a workboat, of what it is for your boat. So if you're carrying cargo, if you're towing, if you're carrying 15 persons and carrying less than X amount, you're a pilot boat or a dedicated pilot boat. Make sure you know what it is for your boat or your background so the examiner can feel comfortable, feel all mushy inside that you do know what you're meant to be doing on your boat, what certificates you have, and what their survey is. So their verification and their inspection. The validity and cancellation of documents. So for you to maintain your documentation, you must be maintained, you must be within the code, you must have the appropriate crew, you must be doing the appropriate things. Let's have a look at it together. The validity of a certificate is dependent upon the vessel being maintained, equipped and operated in accordance with the documented arrangements contained in the Compliance Examination and Declaration Report SWB2. The certificate will cease to be valid if the intermediate or annual examination as appropriate, including of the examination of the vessel out of the water, are not completed within the period specified in the code. Now that's important to you as a new captain, isn't it? If you don't keep your boat maintained and you don't have the certification valid, you will not be able to go to sea. The validity of the certificate should be restored by carrying out the appropriate examination, which in such circumstances should consist of requirements of the examination that was not carried out. But its thoroughness and stringency should have regard to the time this examination was allowed to lapse. When an examination has been requested more than 1 month after the required specified period, authorised persons should refer to the certifying authority for advice on the enhanced level of the examination required. Don't let your certification go out of date. Yeah, really important, especially if you're joining a boat. You must make sure you know when it is going to. It's your fault, your problem. Normally it'd be expected that such an examination would be the same extent as a renewal. That's a much longer, deeper system. You can get an interim certificate, and you'll hear occasionally in some of these videos, and you'll hear it in the past papers, an interim certificate. That is an intermediate. That is a short-term certificate. An interim certificate may be issued by a certifying authority in order to permit a vessel to trade upon satisfactory completion of a survey in every respect. So you have it for a short amount of time, while the permanent full-time certificate is being prepared. So if you have an interim, it just means for a short period of time. The period of validity of an interim certificate may be extended up to 5 months from the date of issue, or may be replaced by the full-term certificate. UK vessels operating outside the UK, the workboat certificate, pilot boat certificate, or workboat certificate with a pilot boat is a UK certificate. We discussed this when we were doing the certificates. You'd have to get, you'd have to confirm if the flag state you're going to will accept it, and you may need to get a load line exemption. Generally, international conventions do not consider these small vessels, and therefore other maritime administrations or port state authorities are under no obligation to accept a UK certification for vessels in their water. The last thing I want to talk about is the actual certificate. So I would say the most common one would be the workboat certificate. So you're going to have on the front of it, workboat certificate, the name of your vessel, its unique number issued under the MCA, name and name and address of the owner, managing agent, type of vessel, use of vessel, you can all read. I want you to make sure that you could explain the front of this workboat certificate. It's then going to have any limitations on the back of the certificate. It's going to have maximum loading condition, permitted area of operation, so 0 to 6, GMDSS sea area, whether or not it's sea area A1, A2, or possibly even A3. Midterm examination due before, so that's your midway, that's an intermediate. And the certificate was issued at whichever office, on whichever date, so you know when it has to be renewed. 5-year, subject to possibly annual and or intermediate out of the water. A signature, and this certificate is equivalent to a UK or load line exemption certificate. MLC compliance standard on the back. Any conditions or limitations that are subject to your vessel. So this is the certificate. You are also going to have, what else? You're going to have a statement of compliance. And this is confirming that you are complying with either the workboat code or the small vessel code. It's very similar. I accept there's not much difference, but you are going to have both a certificate and a document or statement of compliance. How would you prepare for a survey? Quite a good question. I actually haven't seen it in the Master 200 exams so far, but I think we should be prepared for it. What does this certificate confirm? It confirms that we are meeting the requirements of the workboat code or the small vessel code. So to make sure we're complying, we would need to look at the code as a whole. Looking at the contents, to prepare for a survey, either your annual, your intermediate, or your renewal, or your initial, you're going to be looking at the construction and structural strength of the vessel. So you're going to make sure that the vessel is still in good condition, the metal's not corroded, it's not become thinner aluminium or thinner steel, there's not huge damage, there's not bits of the bulwarks missing. Weather tight integrity, that is stopping the water coming inside the vessel, so that any hatches, any closing arrangements, any anything that stops the water coming in, just the way the doors shut, that the seals are in good condition. The water freeing arrangements, that's scuppers, freeing ports, that the water is able to escape the deck, so we're not getting any free surface effect. Machinery, so we're looking at your main engines, your generators, everything working, everything being maintained, and you're having proof of planned maintenance. Electrical arrangements, so the communications between the bridge and the steering arrangement, that all electrical items are working as they should. The lights come on. Steering gear, rudder and propeller systems. That rudder and propeller systems, they're really into that when you're out of the water. They're going to do a bump test. They're going to check your rear bearings, that everything hasn't got too much play. They're going to check the condition of the prop. They're going to check the cutlass bearings. They're going to be looking at that quite carefully in that one. So steering gear, no free play. Bilge pumping, that you can pump your bilges, and it's all done in compliance with MARPOL. Stability, if you have a stability booklet or you're required to have a stability booklet, it's valid for your vessel. Inclining experiments, etc. have all been done. Freeboard and freeboard marking, so that is your line on the side of the ship, and it's proving that you have enough freeboard between that line, that's the amount you can carry either in saltwater or the freshwater allowance, and then the freeboard mark. Then we're going to have life-saving appliances, confirming that your life jackets, your life rafts, immersion suits as required will be correct. We'll go into quite a lot of LSA later on. Fire safety, the same concept, fire appliances, radio communications, that all of your GMDSS equipment is there and functioning and being maintained. Navigation lights, shapes and sound signals as per the COLREGs. Navigation equipment, we've got lots to talk about there, haven't we? GPS, AIS, etc. Miscellaneous equipment, anything that could be miscellaneous. I know, lights, searchlights, Aldous lamps, maneuvering lights. Anchors and cables, yeah, you're going to have that in your lifting register. accommodation and recreational facilities, depending if you're MLC or non-MLC compliant, protection of personnel, medical care, tenders, safe manning, procedures. So you're going to make sure that you can prove that you are safely manned, that all of your crew have the appropriate COC, the appropriate STCW, ENG1s, SEAs, Seafarer Employment Agreements. Prevention of pollution, so you've got your garbage management plan if required, garbage placards. You are doing everything in compliance for safe, to stop any pollution going on. Safety management, so that you have an SMS in place and that you're acting upon it. MLC, you've got the appropriate certification and that you can prove that you're complying with MLC. So how would I prepare for a survey as the master? I would ensure everything that is required under MGN 280, the small vessel code, or the workboat code, depending on which code I'm complying with, is in place and as it should be. Yeah, make sure. I mean, I haven't seen that come up, but I could imagine it coming up. Something that comes up for the bigger boats, how would you prepare for? So I want you to kind of create a flashcard and a thought process that you know, and you can use it twice, can't you? What's inside the workboat code? What does it mean? Well, sir, it means that the vessel has been built to the appropriate strength, watertight integrity, water-freeing arrangements, machinery, electrical equipment, bilge and steering, pollution, safe manning. That is this exam, isn't it? So you might as well learn it as being a reference for how you prepare for a survey, what's inside the workboat code, and to a certain extent, the unofficial syllabus of this exam. Okay, so we're happy from what certificates, and we're happy that we have survey, and it depends on where we're going, our type of use of vessel, and we can either have an annual and or an intermediate and out of water and a renewal. Good job. Keep going. Keep watching. It's fun, isn't it?